The most upsetting crimes are those committed against the youngest and most innocent of victims, children. Tonight's tale is about one such case that baffled law enforcement for over 60 years. It is a tale that will bring a lump to the throat of any doting parent. From the flip side, this episode lays out what we know thus far about a young boy who for 60 or so years was known simply as America's unknown child, aka the boy in the box. On the morning of February 25th, 1957, the Philadelphia Police Department received a tip from a student known simply as Fred of a macabre finding in a box located at the side of the Susquehanna Road. Now, when authorities eventually arrived and opened the box, they found the malnourished and badly beaten body of what appeared to be a very young boy. At first glance, the malnourished and stunted development of the boy was noted. Although there was strong evidence of beatings, what puzzled law enforcement and medical examiners at the time, beyond the obvious, was the state in which the boy was groomed. It seemed that his eyebrows had been trimmed, his nails were manicured and cleaned, and he'd also had a haircut before his death. His body had been forcibly contorted to fit inside a box where he was found, and it bore all of the telltale signs of a traumatic young life. Now, numerous scars were evident on the body. Those found around his ankles, his groin and his chin were all considered surgical in origin. He was also covered in extensive bruising and also bore evidence of having been in the vicinity of water before or during what would have been his final moments on this earth. His cause of death, however, was listed as blunt force trauma, specific to the blows sustained to the head of the victim. Now, this case would test the mettle of even the most hardened of investigators, many of whom were the parents of children of roughly the same age. Now, what kind of monster could do this to such an innocent young child? But above all, the question on the lips of all of those assigned to the case was the same. Who was this young victim? Who was this infant who would ultimately be known as the boy in the box? Now, initially, the police had received a tip from Fred, the student, who had said he was hunting rabbits in the fields around the area where the box was discovered. This was a statement that would soon prove to be false. Fred, under cross-examination, confessed to actually spying on the girls at a nearby all-girls school with a cheap pair of binoculars, an activity, it transpired, that he regularly engaged in. Now, even though Fred was the person to call in the discovery of the boy, he wasn't the first to find him. A poacher, who hadn't been named, had been out setting his illegal muskrat snares, and he'd happened upon the box but failed to act because he didn't want the police to find his illegal snares, which they eventually did anyway. Now, this poacher testified that he thought the boy in the box resembled a doll, given the victim's stunted size and malnourished state. His reluctance to notify law enforcement prolonged the body's exposure to the freezing conditions of a frigid Philadelphia in the grip of winter. The police also found a few items within and around the box that they associated with the victim. Although the victim was found to be naked, there was a small hat, a scarf and a handkerchief with the single letter G embroidered in one corner, all of which were found in the immediate vicinity. Now, all of these items were subsequently retained as evidence in the case, but none of them led to any relevant leads. Now, once the body had been examined, photographed and fingerprinted, the authorities were optimistic about a quick resolution to the case. I mean, no one really loses a 4-year-old son without reporting it, right? Every now and again, cases come along that resonate with the public, and this was one such case. Initially, there was massive public interest in finding both the identity of the boy in the box and, of course, the hope of bringing his killer or killers to justice. An artist's impression of the boy was drawn up and some 400,000 flyers were printed and delivered throughout the region. In fact, they were delivered accompanying the monthly gas bills in the hope that someone may have known the child. The area where the body was found was extensively searched by 270 police academy students who found the previously mentioned hat, scarf and monogrammed handkerchief. Alas, it seemed the boy in the box had taken his identity to the grave. Extensive research found that the box in which the body had been found had originally been used by J.C. Penney to ship a particular bassinet. Unfortunately, this was 1957, and many years before CCTV would become a thing. Detectives simply didn't have the luxury of hours of footage to sift through in order to single anyone out who was buying such a bassinet in order to develop a list of people to question. As one after another of the leads in the case dried up, it seemed the unidentified boy, who had since been buried below a tombstone that bore 3 single words, America's Unknown Child, would be lost forever. Now, such was the outpouring of sympathy for the boy that a plot of land was donated for his grave, which is located in the Ivy Hill Cemetery in Cedar Brook, Philadelphia. The coffin, headstone and funeral service were all donated by the son of the man who had originally buried the boy in 1957. At the time of the burial, there was a massive public turnout, and city residents, even to this day, keep the grave decorated with flowers and toys. Theories about the boy started to emerge, with one centred around a foster home located under 2 miles from where the body was found. In 1960, a man named Remington Bristow, a member of the public, with an interest in the case and who was also determined to solve it, contacted a psychic in the hope that they could help. Now, he was instructed by the psychic to search for a house that resembled the foster home, and when that same psychic was brought to the site where the body was found, she immediately led Bristow to that foster home. Now, unfortunately, with such little evidence to go on, Bristow doggedly kept the foster home under scrutiny and attended an estate sale in which he discovered a bassinet for sale of the same kind, transported in boxes similar to the one in which the body had been discarded. Further, he found blankets with patterns similar to the scarf that had been found in the vicinity of the crime scene. Bristow surmised that the body had belonged to a child born out of wedlock to the homeowner's daughter. Although he could never prove it, he suggested that the boy was killed so as not to bring shame and disgrace on the family. Sadly, this was a hunch that Bristow eventually took to the grave when he passed away in 1993. Further investigation found that the full register of foster children that had passed through the facility, though, found that they were all alive and accounted for. On the findings of the Vidocq Society, after interviews with both the father and stepdaughter of the facility, the foster home investigation was closed. Now, just then I mentioned the Vidocq Society, and the Vidocq Society, that is a members-only crime-solving club based in Philadelphia. Its membership is comprised of retired law enforcement officers and criminal profilers. The society itself is named after Eugène François Vidocq, a groundbreaking 19th century French private detective who helped police by using the psychology of the criminal to solve cold cases and homicides. Now, as the years rolled on, the case became colder. Case files were cast into the dark recesses of the police department evidence archives. It wasn't until DNA testing became a thing that the case would get a break. Exhumed in 1998 to extract a DNA sample from the body, which was eventually taken from a tooth, after which the body was once again laid to rest. Now, 4 years later, in February of 2002, detectives acted on what they thought was a potential break in the case. A woman known simply as Martha came forward as she had accused her own mother of buying and eventually killing the boy. While at the time the story may have carried some plausibility, the officers were somewhat reluctant and concerned once they learned that Martha had a history of mental health issues. Now, Martha had testified that her parents had bought the boy from his original parents in 1954, given that he'd been born out of wedlock. Her testimony continued that her parents had beaten the boy to death and discarded of his body in a box by the side of the road some miles outside of town. Now, investigators would eventually close their questioning of Martha when neighbours of the girl's family were contacted. Those who'd had access to the house during the time frame mentioned by Martha testified that at no time did any young boy ever live with the family. The years came and went, and in 2016 the body was once more exhumed for the additional extraction of DNA samples. And in that same year, a couple of writers, Jim Hoffman from Los Angeles, California, and Louis Romano from New Jersey, believed that they had finally unearthed the boy's identity. Their research identified a family of interest from the Memphis, Tennessee region. They subsequently requested a DNA comparison be made from a sample acquired from the family and that of the unknown boy. Now, it was never fully disclosed why the family in question was suspect of being involved in the case, and a DNA sample of one of them was eventually recovered in 2014. This sample was subsequently tested against the DNA that had been retrieved from the body of the boy in the box. And in December of 2017, Homicide Sergeant Bob Kuhlmeyer confirmed that the DNA sample taken from the Memphis-based family member and that of the body in the box bore no connection. Once again, the case went cold. It was as if there would never be closure for the victim. However, closure did come eventually in this case in November of 2022. An announcement by the Philadelphia Police Department on November 30th, 2022, announced that they had finally identified America's unknown child, and this was accomplished through the process of genetic testing and investigative genetic genealogy. It wasn't, however, until the morning of December the 8th, 2022, that they would finally divulge the name. He was ultimately identified as 4-year-old Joseph Augustus Zarelli, who had been born on January the 13th, 1953. Genealogists had uncovered his name in October of 2021, almost a year before the public announcement. Joseph was finally identified based on DNA uploaded to a public database by somebody that turned out to be a first cousin. Now, investigators subsequently identified Joseph's parents when the mother of that first cousin provided a genetic sample to GED Match, an online genetic genealogy and family tree research service. While closure had come insofar as for the victim now being identified, the Philadelphia Police Department still treat this case as ongoing. They also continue to request that anyone who may have any pertinent information about the boy to step forward. Police records show that the boy had lived in the region of 61st and Market Street and that he had lived until the age of 4. This was based on the understanding that he had lived with his parents. However, with that assumption came complications. Joseph's father was eventually named as Augustus J. Zarelli, and his mother as being Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, also known as Betsy. Now, Augustus was a prominent builder in the region who eventually established a successful construction and real estate business. While little is known about Betty, some elements of the assumptions in this case made to date bore true. Little Joseph was indeed born out of wedlock. He was the result of an affair between his parents, which, in 1954, was frowned on by the majority of society. Now, while there are no official records that show that Joseph was actually adopted, a lead from a family member of Betsy who requested anonymity told a Philadelphia Inquirer reporter that Betsy had previously also put a daughter up for adoption in 1950, just 3 years before Joseph was born. Now, that previous adoption, the family member said, had been handled by a Catholic school in the region. Now, the father, Augustus Zarelli, passed away in 2014, and he'd spent his life building his business. Likewise, Betsy passed away in 1991, although her situation was a bit different. She died after a prolonged battle with lung cancer, which was probably brought about after being in close contact with asbestos, given that she worked in a cannery until diminishing health stalled her ability to work. Now, if any consolation is to come from this, is that neither parent lived to know what became of their illegitimate child that they had put out to foster, and nor of the violent, depraved acts that ultimately claimed his life. So there you have it, folks, the very sad tale of Joseph Zarelli, also known as America's unknown child. Now, if you like this video, please be sure to leave a like on this or any one of the videos in the archives. As normal, I'd like to ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. Please also hit that little notifications bell so that you'll be notified as and when new content is available from yours truly here on The Flip Side. And also, if you feel like you do have a story that you'd like me to research for possible future inclusion in the channel, please feel free to submit those ideas in comments on any one of the videos below or via the community tab in the toolbar. Other than that, all that remains is for me to wish you all the best. Please stay safe, stay sane, and above all, stay healthy. See you soon, folks. Take care, and until the next time, here on The Flip Side.